Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Hope you're doing absolutely fine. The virus is spreading rapidly, and all of us need to ensure that we are taking vaccines. So, right now, the government of India has started vaccinations for everyone above 18 years of age. And a sincere request to all of you is to please register yourself on the COVID portal and take your vaccinations as soon as possible. Now, coming down to the topic, in our previous video, we talked and we discussed about Agile ceremonies. And as promised, today's session is going to be on the Scrum Artifacts. Before that, please subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon to stay updated. Let us know in the comment section below what kind of artifacts or what has been your experience in terms of managing Scrum Artifacts. As I always say, let's get started. Welcome back, guys. So the first question that comes to our mind is, why do we have these Scrum artifacts? Now, the main purpose why these Scrum artifacts are in place is to ensure transparency across teams and stakeholders. Now, if you know, these are those artifacts that help a Scrum team or these group of Scrum teams deliver a product for the stakeholders. And to do that, we need to ensure that these artifacts are maintained properly and are updated on a timely basis. Coming down to the Scrum artifacts, there are primarily three artifacts that are used or suggested by Scrum. Number one is product backlog, number two is sprint backlog, and number three is product increment. Let us discuss about each of these in detail. Product backlog is a list of everything that is required to deliver a product. Many people feel that it is just a list of user stories or let's say the epics or features, but the fact of the matter is that it is everything that is related to the product development, starting from test evidences, test scripts. It can be the acceptance criteria, it can be the features, it can be the overall test criteria, the defects, the bugs, all those things come under the product backlog. Now, product backlog has four major attributes. Number one is the description, number two is the order, number three is the value, and number four is the estimate. Now, each of these needs to be defined when you are defining any item as part of the product backlog. This product backlog is never finite, it's ever evolving. Now, when you start with the development of the product, you might feel that you have a finite list or a small list of items, but as you proceed with the first sprint, you realize that you get a lot of feedbacks, and using those feedbacks, you can definitely evolve or update the product backlog. Now, the owner of a product backlog is the product owner. Now, he or she is the person whose responsibility is to update the product backlog based on his discussions with the stakeholders. Now, when it comes to prioritizing in terms of items on the product backlog, there are product refinement sessions which are organized or which are conducted to ensure that the items on the product backlog are in proper sequence or are in the right priority order. Product owner uses product backlog to keep a check on the progress of the overall product development. Now, he can use multiple charts, primarily the burn up chart, the burn down chart, or the cumulative flow diagram. Coming next to the sprint backlog, now it is the artifact which is wholly managed by the development team, and it is primarily a subset of the product backlog. Sprint backlog is usually finalized as part of the sprint planning meeting. This artifact is used by the development team to track their progress. Now, when there are situations when new items come in as part of the sprint backlog, let's say there is a production incident that has come in or a critical defect that has been identified and needs an immediate fix, that is when there are items which come under the sprint backlog and needs to be prioritized ahead. Now, when it comes to sprint backlog, usually product owner is not the person who tries to intervene in that, because mostly sprint backlog is more of a technical kind of artifact which contains items more specific to the technical changes and not the functional ones. Sprint backlog is usually taken care of like a pull system. So it's not a push mechanism, it's a pull mechanism where the development team actually pulls item from the sprint backlog and delivers them as part of the sprint. The last and the final artifact is the product increment. Now, product increments are nothing but some of the sprint backlogs that are already completed. Now, usually, if there are multiple teams working on a single product, then the effort of all these Scrum teams usually gets categorized or gets defined as a product increment. Now, usually increments should always be in a releasable state, but it depends on the product owner if he or she wants to release it or not. But it is usually advised that once in every 2 months, there should be a release. Now, when you, let's say you don't release in every couple of months, what happens is you might be following Scrum, but not the core value of it, because the core value of Agile tells us that you need to break down items and you need to deliver them in small increments so that you have that scope, or you have that benefit of making changes as and when you need in short intervals. To summarize what we discussed today, there are three types of artifacts: the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and the product increment. These artifacts are there solely for the purpose to ensure transparency. What they do is they optimize the value and they minimize the overall risk. And in the absence of artifacts, there will always be a gap or a blind spot in between different teams. And these artifacts ensure, or they, once you start maintaining them, you actually try to ensure that you don't have many gaps between how you're proceeding with the product development. Coming now to the last section of this video, that is questions for interview. Now, in this particular section, I would be discussing with you what kind of questions you might expect from a recruiter. Now, these questions might differ based depending on what role you're applying for. If you're applying for a product owner, then the questions will be pretty different from the ones that come to a Scrum Master, or let's say a Agile developer, right? These are definitely very different. If you're a product owner, usually the questions revolve around the product backlog. As I already discussed, that product owner is the owner of the product backlog, and usually the questions will revolve around how do you prioritize, how do you assign value, how do you decide which items have to be taken up front, how frequently you discuss with the stakeholders, and how frequently you conduct these refinement sessions with the team. All these questions come as part of a product owner role when you are getting interviewed. If you are being asked, if let's say you are attending a Scrum Master interview, then the question will be more on the managing front. Because if you see these product backlogs or Scrum or the sprint backlogs, or in that case the product increments, all these are managed by the Scrum Master. He or she is the person or the individual who helps the team and the product owner ensure that all these artifacts are in place and are being maintained properly, so that all the reports that are generated are in place. So when it comes to Scrum Master, it will be more on the process front. Now, when it comes to a generic agile interview where the individual wants to understand whether you are aware of agile or not, then definitely these questions, for example, what is the product backlog? How do you decide which items to pick as part of the sprint backlog? Or let's say how frequently you get a chance to see the product increments getting released into the production environment. All these questions are part of someone of an interview where you are getting interviewed for a role which requires a knowledge on Agile. And if you want to discuss these answers in detail pertaining to your experience and your project, please check out our career consultancy services. Go ahead, check out our website, go there and book your session so that we can have a direct call with you and we can answer all your questions and prepare you for your next interview. So that's it for today's video. In our next video, we will be understanding more concepts on Scrum. So please subscribe to the channel if you really want to stay updated. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.